I'm Lyn Fairly. Welcome back to Our Ventura TV. I have a really special guest today. His name is Jack Reiss. Welcome, Jack Reiss.
Thank you for having me, Lyn.
You bet. Very few people get to do what you do.
A professional boxing ref, yes.
That's right. But we're going to go back in time a little bit and find out when you first got interested in boxing. I believe you're from Brooklyn.
Yes, I am.
And as a teenager in Brooklyn, you had your sneaks on and you had a belt ready. Why?
Well, as a kid growing up in that place, you had to be ready when you walked out the door that you could possibly get into a fight. So I always made sure I had sneakers tight so I could run if I had to and fight if I had to, and a belt in case I had to pull it off if I got into a fight. And
that brought you right around to martial arts, is that correct?
Yeah, growing up I wanted to learn how to defend myself, so I got into martial arts, and actually I played a lot of ice hockey growing up, and the martial arts was helping with that, and it all worked out.
And then tell us about how you got into boxing.
Well, I moved out to California after I had an amateur kickboxing match and I injured myself. Came out here for a couple of weeks and ended up staying, and got on the fire department, worked for 31 years. I was an LA City fireman. And while I was working, I had tickets to the Kings. I had season tickets to the Kings, and I used to go to a lot of fights. And then after getting married and having some children and coming home from 3 days at work and then going to a boxing match and maybe a hockey game, it got kind of old at home. I was going out so much. And I said to myself, well, it would be great if I could do something professionally with boxing or hockey. So I pursued both entities.
Well, back up just a second because you skipped over an important part about your fire career. You were actually the LA City Fire Marshal at some point in time.
Yes, throughout my term with the department, I promoted a couple of times, and while I was a captain, they asked me to do some administrative duty, and I ran 2 units in the Fire Prevention Bureau. The one was the public assemblage unit, where we regulated all the public events. I was one of the fire marshals. We went out and regulated the Oscars, the Grammys, and everything that the public was invited to. It was really an enjoyable job.
And during your time as fireman, you also had some emergency medical sort of response treatment training, rather. And I think that translates to boxing as well a little bit.
Great question. I was an emergency medical technician from the first months I was on the job, and I used that skill set of 31 years of experience dealing with trauma to assess the fighters in the ring to see how much damage they've had and when it's time to pull the plug and stop the fight. Great question.
And we'll get to that in just a second.
Okay.
Because we need to know, what does it take to train to be a boxing referee?
It takes, well, what it took for me to get on was I had to apply with the California State Athletic Commission. My timing was pretty good. I was lucky. And they were just about to have a class. They had some referees that were getting long in the tooth, getting pretty old, and they wanted to replace them. And I happened to come in at that time. And it was a 3-year program. The first year was classroom and actual in the ring with fighters while being mentored, going to fights, scoring the fights, and learning from what was actually happening. The second year was you got to work 1 fight as a ref or a judge, or both, 1 time per month for $50. And then the third year, you kind of signed a waiver that they could let go of you anytime, and you got worked into this, the club shows, the smaller fights, the 4-rounders, and then you had to work your way up.
And how many years have you been a boxing ref?
15.
15 already. Now, a 4-rounder is where you start if you're an amateur, and then there's 6, 8, 10, and 12 rounds possible. Is that correct?
Correct. The 4-rounders are professional, but it's what they start out at. And whatever a fighter starts out at, before he moves into the higher round fights, he needs to demonstrate that he can win at the weight class he's at the number of rounds he's fighting. You don't want to take a guy who's lost 6 4-rounders and then put him in a 6 or an 8-rounder. He hasn't demonstrated he could win in that other scenario yet.
Now, you said he, but there are she's that yes. fight. In fact, just recently in Oxnard, there was a huge event where Maureen Shea, I think she's a featherweight champion, was the sparring partner for Hilary Swank in the movie The $1 Million Baby. So we could say maybe Maureen Shea's the real $1 Million Baby. She fought a gal from Colombia, I believe. Cordero was her last name recently. And you were the ref for that fight.
It was great.
It was a fantastic fight. Now, just as a segue, I want to know what's the difference between the male fighters and the female fighters?
Well, there used to be a huge gap between the skill levels, but over the last 5 years or so, that's really changed. And the skill levels of a Maureen O'Shea and other female fighters have changed the sport dramatically. It's really as close as anything else there is to male boxing. It's the same.
Wow. Well, the arm, you know, there was a photo of her recently with among the other boxers in that promotion for that fight, and I was looking at all their left arms because they posed something like this. Her arm was bigger than one of the guys in the picture. I would not want to be in a dark alley with her all mad. Trust me.
You'd want her on your side if we were both in a dark alley together.
I would definitely want a pro on my side. Now, if I'm in the locker room pre-fight, okay, male or female, what are you telling me? You're giving me the rules. You're breaking it down, the how to and the what for.
Well, basically what I'm trying to do is avoid any confusion while we're in the ring. So I'm going to try to make you totally understand what I expect of you and what you can expect of me. And I'm going to go over some things that we have to do to get business done. Number one, you have to listen and obey my commands at all times. When I say stop, you got to stop. When I say break, you got to break. And anything else I tell you, you have to follow for your safety. Second thing I'm going to tell you is protect yourself at all times. Protect yourself during my intervention, on a break, at the end of the round, because I don't want you to get hit with a cheap shot. And if you do get hit with a cheap shot, don't retaliate, because then you're almost forcing me to take points away from you. Don't retaliate. I'll get in there and do something. Then I'll just remind you of a few things in California that we are very strict on. Rabbit punches behind the head and kidney punches. They're very dangerous. We don't want it. So if your opponent's ever in a position awkward and you have that opening, don't take it. I'll be yelling, stop, don't take it. And then I'll tell you the situations, such as breaking, how I'm going to want you guys to break. Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to try to talk you out of the break, out of the clinch. If I can't, I'm going to say stop, then I'm going to say break, and I expect you to take 2 steps back. The next thing I'll go over is 3 important rules: that there's no standing 8 count, there's no 3 knockdown rule, and you cannot be saved by the bell in any round except the final round in California. And then after that, the thing I'm going to say that's the most important thing to the fighters is that I really don't care who wins the fight. I care about you. I care about the fighter. And what that means is you have to follow my commands at all times. It's not my job to assume that you're okay. You have to prove it to me. So 2 scenarios might be, if you're on the ropes taking a lot of shots, I'm going to be saying, fight, get out, improve your position. And you've got to be able to respond to that, because if I'm telling you to improve your position and you're standing there just taking punches without doing anything, I'm stopping the fight. The second scenario would be if you get knocked down. It's normal in professional fighting. It's not a big deal, but when you get up, you look at me and I'm going to ask you, can you continue? Say yes. Are you okay? Say yes. I'm going to ask you to walk to me to check your gait as you walk in, and I'm going to ask you to give me your gloves, and I'm going to wipe your gloves. I'm checking to see if you're alert and oriented to person, place, and purpose. If you're able to follow my commands, I know you're okay. I can allow you to go out. I know you'll be able to intelligently defend yourself. If I'm asking you these things and you're standing there with your hands down, wobbling, fight's over.
Now that's where that emergency medical treatment came in handy from the fire department.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. Now you got hit recently,
yes.
Accidentally. You got elbowed in the head, I think. Right?
Yes.
So what did you do for yourself?
That's an interesting question. It was Andre Ward fighting Edwin Rodriguez for the super middleweight championship of the world on HBO. And those 2 guys were so aggravated at each other. There was so much tension that they fought like 2 kids in a playground rather than 2 champions with millions of people watching them. So they were fighting after I said stop. They were in an awkward position and they were like brawling like 2 crazy kids. I went to separate them and I got hit with a good left hand. When I finally got them separated and I got them to both corners, I had to take about 6 or 8 seconds to get, the dizziness out of my head, and that's what I did. I stalled, basically.
Well, who's checking on you?
No one.
Oh my goodness!
I didn't go down.
No, and you did not. That's remarkable, really. So say you did. Who takes over reffing the game? Are there spare refs in the audience, or
yes,
somebody else that could take your place?
Yeah, it's a very rare occasion that would happen, but there are people there that could jump in and replace you. There's lots of stuff on YouTube where you see referees getting knocked out and actually dragged out of the ring. Fortunately, that hasn't happened to me yet.
That's never happened to you.
Yet.
What's the biggest fight you've ever reffed?
Well, it's hard to say the biggest, but I've had fights where 16,000 people have watched it live, and 15 million people have watched it on TV. I've had quite a few of those on HBO, ESPN, Showtime, and such.
You're famous. You're famous, Jack Reiss. That's amazing.
I'm famous in my own mind.
Well, no, like I said, there are very few people on earth that get to be refs. What do you do to stay in shape? What are you doing right now to get ready for your next fight?
Well, as far as physically, I exercise 6 days a week. I do walking, running combination, calisthenics, and weights on a regular basis. I live out in the harbor out in Oxnard, and I love it out there. I love the ocean air and the harbor air. I do that. But as far as mentally prepare myself for a bout, I have a regiment that I follow to get myself mentally prepared. The worst thing that you could do is get in the ring and mentally not be ready, and something happens really quick. You either stop the fight too quick, or you let a guy get hurt, or you ruin it for all the fans and the people that have promoted it. So I go through a regimen of running myself through scenarios that I have a book that I've kept for years. Fighter gets knocked down, what do? Fighter gets hit while he's down, punching on the brake. I just go through pages and pages worth of scenarios. And even I go to some local gyms here out in Oxnard and Ventura, great boxing community, and I move around with the pros as they're sparring for their upcoming bouts. It gets me physically in the moment, so when I step in that ring and there hasn't been a gap maybe of a month.
So Knuckleheads is one, I think, where Maureen Shea trains.
Absolutely.
York Core and Fitness is another one where they do functional training, I believe. It's not a typical boxing ring per se, but they can do functional training at York. Where else do they train in this area?
The biggest stable of professional fighters, especially world champions, is by far Robert Garcia's Boxing Academy in Pacific.
Indeed. Yes, it is.
He has Mikey Garcia, Brandon Rios, he had Kelly Pavlik, Marcos Maidana. He has all of these guys training at that gym. It's a great place, boxing atmosphere.
You know, on the fight card...
As well as Knuckleheads.
Knuckleheads, yes. The fight card for this last fight in Oxnard, and by the way, boxing is back officially in Oxnard, and those promoters are going to bring it more often, actually, to the Oxnard Performing Center and bigger venues eventually. So I think we're going to be seeing you quite a lot.
I hope so.
Yeah, we hope we get you a lot. But in this last fight card, there was a fellow from Russia who also was in a fight at the fairgrounds. Now that's a big guy, and is he a world champion? Do you know about Maxim? I can't think of his last name because it's Russian.
He's not a world champion. He had an outstanding amateur career, and they're bringing him up slowly through the ranks. And it's funny that you say about this Russian or guys from Kazakhstan. Boxing's always been the immigrant sport. In the early parts of the century, 19th century, the Jewish, Russian, and Italian immigrants were all the guys, the champs in the boxing, and it changed to black fighters and Hispanic fighters. And now we're seeing that Eastern European influence, the immigrants that are coming to this country that are hungry or fighting, and they're becoming the champions.
You know, boxing's been around since the gladiators, I think you said, and yes. It's nice to have you in the ring, and I think you're going to be around for a whole lot longer as well, because you're in shape, you look great for your age, and it's very exciting to have you here today.
Thank you very much.
If someone wanted to find out more about you, how would they do that, Jack Reiss?
They can go to my website. It's the number 2jackreiss.com, 2jackreiss.com, and I have a website, and there's contact information, and you can learn a little bit more about me.
And boxing, for that
matter. Of course, boxing. All right. There's videos on there from fights and different things.
That's very, very exciting. Thank you very much for being my guest today on Our Ventura TV.
Thank you for having me. I love this community. I've lived here for over 15 years, and it's great.
It is great, isn't it? And you're a champ in the ring.
Oh, thank you.
You bet. Thank you. Please stay tuned to Our Ventura TV.